Hello nerds, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be taking you through the 6 books that I read in February. Surprisingly, I stuck really well to the February TBR that I made, which is very rare for me because I'm a mood reader. One day I could be in the biggest mood for a book, and then the next day I will completely be disinterested in that book. I had planned to read 5 new books and then finish 3 current reads, and I finished all my current reads, and then I finished 2 of the books that I'd planned to read, and I'm very proud of myself for this. As a mood reader, this is quite the accomplishment. As always, I will tell you what the book is about. I'll give you a short little synopsis, and then I will share one thing I loved, one thing I didn't love so much, and then who I would recommend this book to. And I think I need to start with the book that I have discovered, which has become a new favorite. It was a 6-star read for me, if that is even possible. It broke the rating scale, and that was Babel by R.F. Kuang. Like absolutely everybody on the internet right now, I am trying to make my way through all of her books before Catabasis is published in August. What's the word for an author's collected works? Like, I swear there's a word for it. I was about to say discography, but it's definitely not discography. Anyways, I'm trying to make my way through her collected works, and this was the last one on that list, and I freaking fell in love with it. It was incredible. Sadly, I did read it with a library copy, and then I had to return that copy, but I did immediately go out and buy myself a physical copy so that I could have a trophy for my shelf and have it on me whenever I want to reference it and reread it. But I kind of had like a special bond with that library copy, so I'm quite sad that I no longer have it. Anyways, this is a dark academia fantasy novel set in the 1800s at Oxford University. The main character is a Chinese boy named Robin Swift, and he was orphaned by cholera in China, in a city called Canton, and then he was taken to London by a mysterious professor named Richard Lovell. This professor then prepares Robin for silverworking at Oxford's prestigious Royal Institute of Translation, aka the Tower of Babel, which is on the cover. Silverworking is the art of manifesting the meaning of words lost in translation using magical silver bars. And these bars serve the British Empire's quest for colonization. Robin gets caught between academic life at Babel and a secret society called the Hermes Society, which is trying to bring down the Empire's imperial expansion project. And this book asks a very, very interesting question, which is, can institutions be brought down from within, or is violence necessary for revolution to be effective? I loved this for many reasons. First of all, I think R.F. Kuang is just such a talented writer. She's incredible. She paints such a vivid picture with her words. It's like I'm watching a movie in my head, and I'm not one of those people that sees pictures in their head very well. Like, I really have to be invested in a story to have that movie playing, and R.F. Kuang is just one of those authors that can do it for me. She really brought Robin's entire world to life. It was amazing. I loved the discussions of the power of language and translation. In another life, I think I would have been a philologist, which is what Robin is studying to become in this book. Also, just really, really miss being a student, so I liked that I got to kind of step into the academic world again. This book is kind of like just one huge info dump, and I just loved that. My only critique of this book was that the what is the plural of asterisks? The asterisks were too small for the footnotes, and I wouldn't notice them in the body of the text until I got to the bottom of the page, and then I would have to go back searching for them. I am recommending this book to absolutely everybody. I think it is just one of those books that everyone should read at least once in their lives. And if you'd like to understand some of the concepts on a deeper level within this book, I did make a little political science reading list that I think would accompany Babel really well. Okay, now I'm just going to take you through all the rest of the books that I read in chronological order of when I read them. So the first book that I finished in February was We by Yevgeny Zamyatin, and I gave it 4.25 stars. This is kind of the father of dystopian classics. It was published in 1924 and was the inspiration for George Orwell's 1984 and Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. It's set in a place called the One State, which is ruled by an enlightened quote-unquote benefactor. It's very Big Brotherish. I think this is where George Orwell got the idea for Big Brother. Literally, the entire city is made of glass. Everybody can see everything at all times. The main character is a man named D503. No, the characters do not have actual names, they are just numbers. Very crazy. And he is the ideal citizen until he meets a woman named I-330, and she completely changes his perspective on life, love, freedom, and sex. 1984 is my favorite modern classic, so what I loved most about We was getting to kind of pinpoint the similarities between these two novels. I really enjoy dystopian fiction in general, and the classics are especially interesting because yes, at the time that they were written, they were metaphors for the era in which the author lived, but even decades later, they seem prophetic. Like it seems like they predicted the future because there are so many things in this book that are happening today. A really interesting fact about this book was that it was written in Russia. The author is a Russian author, and he was exiled for writing this book because it was ideologically undesirable. He wrote it between 1920 and 1921, and it was banned in Russia until 1988. So several decades. He unfortunately died in like the 30s, I believe, and so he never got to see his work published in his homeland. But he did manage to smuggle out a manuscript of this book, and it was then published in English in 1924. I thought it was really interesting to see D503 break away from the propaganda that he'd been indoctrinated into his entire life. However, one thing I didn't love about this novel was how disjointed it felt. It's written in journal entries, and D503 assumes that you know everything about this world. It's an unintentional assumption, but he still does it. And so sometimes he won't fully explain concepts, and sometimes he'll even begin a sentence and then abruptly stop writing, and you're just like, well, what the heck was he about to say? This does make for a difficult read, but I do think that if you like dystopian fiction in general, this is a must read just because it's such a foundational dystopian text. I read the translation by Bela Shayvich, and I would highly recommend this one because this edition has several essays that are really interesting. The introduction is by Margaret Atwood, another dystopian author. And then we actually get George Orwell's book review of We, which he wrote in 1946, and he titled it Freedom and Happiness. That was super interesting to read through, and I'm so glad that it was included in this. And then finally, there's a short essay written by Ursula K. Le Guin called The Stalin in the Soul, Sketch for a Science Fiction Novel, and that was also a super interesting read. These three texts accompany the main novel really, really well. Next up, I read Shuna's Journey by Hayao Miyazaki, and I gave it 4 stars. Miyazaki is a Japanese animator and was the founder of Studio Ghibli, and before he founded Studio Ghibli, he wrote this manga. Shuna is the main character, and he's a young prince in a poor land, and in trying to put food on their table, his people are working themselves to death. When a traveler winds up in Shuna's village and presents him with a seed from a mysterious golden grain, he sets out on an adventure to find the source of these golden seeds. His journey takes him across dangerous lands and all the way to the realm of the god folk. Will Shuna make it back home from his quest? I obviously love Studio Ghibli, as you can probably see from the posters on my wall. I adore the animation style. It's so cozy and nostalgic and comforting, and that all extends into the drawings within this manga. One thing I did struggle with while reading this was the lack of dialogue throughout the story. The storytelling is mainly done through the animation, which is totally fine. I think that's a wonderful way to write a story, but just because I've watched all the Studio Ghibli movies, I was kind of expecting there to be a little bit more dialogue, and so it was kind of jarring that there wasn't much dialogue in this manga at all. Obviously, I'm recommending this to fans of Studio Ghibli, but more specifically, if you love and enjoy the movies Princess Mononoke and Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, I think you'll really love this manga because the similarities between all of these 3 fictional worlds are just wonderful and magical. Then I read Inferno by Dante Alighieri, and I gave this 4 stars. This is an Italian epic poem written in the 14th century in 1320, and it's been a very, very influential work of literature over the centuries. This is the first book in a trilogy called The Divine Comedy, And in this book, the main character Dante takes a dramatic journey through the 9 circles of hell in search of redemption. He encounters monsters, devils, demons, and some of the greatest sinners who ever walked the earth. The second book in the Divine Comedy is called Purgatorio, and it's about Dante's journey through a liminal state between life and death. And then the final installment in this trilogy is called Paradiso, and it's about his journey into heaven. I have not finished the Divine Comedy. I've only read Inferno so far. I really enjoyed this because of all of the references to Greek and Roman mythology, which I am just absolutely obsessed with, and I loved the fact that Alighieri makes fun of several really shitty characters in Greco-Roman myth, for example, Jason and Odysseus, and I'm all here for that. One thing that I did struggle with while reading this were the obscure references to Italian history. I guess they weren't obscure at the time that this was written, but today in 2025, they are definitely a little bit obscure. I am not a historian, so those were completely just went right over my head. But I did get the translation by J.G. Nichols, and I think he has some really excellent footnotes that kind of explain some of those references a little bit more in depth, which helps out a lot. I am for sure going to recommend this to fans of Greco-Roman mythology. Like I said, it often makes fun of some of the most hated characters in myth, which I think is awesome, and it provided a lot of really great comedic relief because there are some gruesome and gory scenes in this. I mean, you can expect that because it's a journey through hell where we're seeing people be eternally punished. And last but not least, I have been rereading the Hunger Games series to prep for Sunrise on the Reaping, which is coming out March 18th. And so far, I've made my way through the Hunger Games and Catching Fire. This whole series has my entire heart and soul. Katniss and Peeta are my babies. I love them so much. They genuinely are my comfort characters, which I know is a little bit crazy because this series is devastating, but they mean everything to me. And obviously, all the books in this series are 5 stars. 6 stars, 10 stars, okay? 20, a million stars, okay? The Hunger Games is a young adult series set in the dystopian nation of Panem, which was built on the ruins of North America. There's the capital, which holds all the power and resources, and then there are 13 districts, which hold none of the power and resources and are completely exploited by the capital. Each year, as punishment for an uprising, the capital forces the districts to offer up one boy and one girl between the ages of 12 and 18 to fight to the death in an arena for the capital citizens' entertainment. For the districts, this is a gruesome and horrific and tragic event. For the capital citizens, this is the year's most exciting sporting event to take place. 24 tributes enter the games each year, but only one comes out. The first book in the series opens on the morning of the Reaping, which is the name for the choosing ceremony for the Hunger Games, and it is about to be the 74th Hunger Games, and the main character is Katniss, and she volunteers when her 12-year-old sister Prim is picked. Suzanne Collins is a diabolically good writer. Every time I reread these books, I come across something new that I've never noticed before, and it just makes for such a fun and exciting reading experience. And you know what? I should probably stop yapping about these books now because otherwise this video will be an hour long. I could legit talk about the Hunger Games forever and ever and ever. And that is it for all the books that I read in February. This was a really good reading month. I had nothing that was below 4 stars, and I discovered a new favorite book along with reading some of my old favorites from childhood. I feel like February, from what I've been seeing online, has been a really good reading month for everybody, and I hope we can keep this energy going into March. Let me know what the best book that you read this month was because I would love to know so that I can add it to my radar. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.